Welcome to Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo. And I'm Dr. Lee Simmons, Director. And we're glad you could come to the zoo, and hope you enjoy both your visit and watching the DVD of the zoo.
Located on South 10th Street in Omaha, Nebraska, Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo has been rated the best zoo by Reader's Digest and is the #1 tourist attraction in Nebraska. It's easy to see why it gets such rave reviews. With many exhibits to view, there's sure to be something for everyone. Want a panoramic view of the zoo? Discover unique views of the zoo from a live steam locomotive. You can cover 2.5 miles of track on one of 2 live steam locomotives. For a ride on fantasy horses, wild animals, and chariots, all with turn-of-the-century detail, visit Sue's Wildlife Carousel. Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo has 130 woodland acres, over a dozen major animal habitats, and more than 19,000 animals representing over 800 species, including dozens of species that are listed as endangered by the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Animals. Explore the zoo on foot or take a round-trip ride on one of our convenient trams. There's a lot to do at Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo, but all these world-class attractions didn't just appear overnight. Here's a brief history of the zoo to date.
There's actually been a zoo in Riverview Park in Omaha since 1895, which makes this one of the oldest continuously functioning zoos in North America. Buffalo Bill came through, as he did in a number of places, and gave the city a pair of bison calves, which they then needed a place to put, so they put them in Riverview Park, and then added a few other, local native animals. In 1908, the city's annual report on the zoo listed the most popular attraction in the zoo that year was a 5-legged calf that some farmer had donated. In late '65, they began to build what is now Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo as a result of a gift that Mrs. Henry Doorly, who was an animal lover and a bird watcher and all, made to the newly formed Omaha Zoological Society. And they've been raising money to build a children's zoo, and Mrs. Doorly said she would make a substantial gift, provided that it was a real zoo, a full-fledged zoo, and of course that was named after her late husband, Henry Doorly, and Henry Doorly was the publisher of the Omaha World Herald. It's quite an interesting history here. Got off to a kind of an early start, found out that $1 million wouldn't build a zoo the size of San Diego, have a little plateau, and then began to get up some momentum again in late 60s, early 70s. And then about 27 years or so ago, we began to then really get momentum, and we did the cat complex. And after, since then, we've done something about every second or third year, something major. Starting in 2002, we opened the desert. We then followed back to back with that in 2003 with the opening of Kingdoms of the Night, the largest nocturnal exhibit in the world. Following Kingdoms of the Night in 2004, Gorilla Valley. With that kind of crazy 4-year run there, we've been averaging a new exhibit every second or third year.
Of course, you won't want to miss the Logier IMAX Theater. You can enjoy larger-than-life adventures on the 61-foot-tall, 83-foot-wide IMAX screen with a 12,000-watt surround sound system.
In many respects, Omaha is a pretty well kept secret in that people really don't expect a zoo of both this size and this quality in a town the size of Omaha. And so it's a surprise for the out-of-towners, and that's good because we exceed their expectations. The cat complex was the biggest project that we had up to that date attempted because still is the largest cat building in North America. We can hold up to 100 great cats. We've never had 100 great cats in it, but we have had over 80 at a time. And we built it and designed and built it primarily as a breeding and management facility that also displayed cats. Unlike some of the exhibits we're building now, where you are immersed in the same habitat as the animals, we don't immerse you in the same habitat with cats because that would be unhealthy. And at that time we didn't have a lot of money to spend on a lot of fancy rock work and all, so we designed it as a management building so that we could hold and breed and manage endangered species of cats. And as it turns out, that was a pretty good decision because we probably bred more tigers and a number of other species than almost anybody anywhere. And even yet today we get cats, particularly tigers, shipped into us to pair up, get pregnant, produce offspring, and then we frequently ship them back to their native zoos. Well, Durham Bear Canyon actually started out in its early life as the very first exhibit in the new Henry Dorley Zoo. It was the very first exhibit done, except that it was bare concrete and pretty stark. With financial help from Marge and Chuck Durham, we completely rehabbed it and redid it, got rid of most of the moats, put in a lot of heavy-duty 1.5-inch glass, got people up close and personal with the bears, covered all of the old concrete with man-made rock, put in the pools and the waterfalls and the trees, and totally reconstructed it. The old retaining walls are still there and the old foundations are still there, but almost everything else in Bear Canyon is new, and it's turned into probably one of the most popular areas in the zoo.
Dedicated in 1989, Durham Bear Canyon features the largest of all bears, polar bears, swimming in a 30,000-gallon pool with above and below viewing. Grizzly bears and exotic Malaysian sun bears are also on display. Continuing Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo's worldwide conservation and education efforts, the Grewcock Center for Conservation and Research provides state-of-the-art medical and research capabilities in the areas of animal care and management, reproductive physiology, nutrition, genetics, and genome resource banking.
The things that we're doing over in the Center for Conservation and Research are really varied, all the way from vaccine trials and vaccine development, which for new vaccines that can be used both in a zoo, but also can be used in the wild. We've got a frozen zoo in which we've got, I think now, about probably 25,000 frozen semen samples from a huge wide range of animals, so that potentially you could go back 100 years from now and kind of reconstitute the genetic makeup of a group of animals as it existed. We're working with in vitro fertilization or test tube fertilization. So the first test tube tiger was born here, the first test tube wild cow was born here, the first test tube gorilla was a part of our work and not born here, but as a collaborative effort with another zoo. In the last 15 or 20 years, zoos have really come into their own and begun to really have a major conservation impact. A lot of what we're doing right now has to do with medical research on captive management. We're also doing a lot of research with plants, a lot of conservation with plants. So some of the rarest, the rarest flower in North America, the prairie fringed orchid, Omaha is the primary place in the whole world that plant is being propagated and grown. There is a very rare fern of the Caribbean that is down to 2 plants after the last hurricane. And from spores that were collected, we now have probably several thousand very small macroscopic ferns that are growing that will then be reintroduced, and we're just about to reintroduce some of those back into native habitat. A lot of the work that we're doing now also has to do with actually identifying what is a species of animal. So we're doing a lot of nuclear genetics, of DNA fingerprinting.
Omaha Zoo has been known for its groundbreaking research in the reproductive physiology of gaur, snow leopards, and tigers. Innovative new approaches have expanded the research to include gorillas, jaguars, and cranes.
Today, there are over 200 zoos in North America that are considered accredited, mainline zoos, but only a very small number of those zoos actually are actively involved in conservation research. And Omaha is kind of at the front edge in a whole lot of things there.
1983, the aviary is the second largest free-flight aviary in the world.
The aviary started out as actually an idea as a way to get rid of a terrible old gully that ran through the middle of the zoo, that back in the days when this was a park, people dumped their refrigerators and old washing machines into, and we'd spend a lot of time cleaning up. I was simply waving my arms one day and saying, someday we'd like to put a big net over this gully and turn it into a walk-through aviary. I happened to be waving my arms in front of just the right person, and so it very quickly, when we had to go ahead to build, which was at the time we built it, was the largest walk-through aviary of any zoo in the world. It's an area that really lends itself to birds that are found around water. We've got flamingos and egrets, and about 3 different species of egrets, and ibis, 2 different species of ibis, and some herons, and some waterfowl. If you go down and look up in the trees, we've got several rookeries where we actually are raising a lot of egrets and ibis and spoonbills in the aviary.
In this 4-acre sanctuary, hundreds of birds fly free.